A boundary violation for space or territory would be a violation of your extended sense of self. In childhood, it's your room, usually. So if your parents, usually your mom, has free access to your room at any point and can interfere and interrupt and just come into your room no matter what at any time and interrupt your time that you're spending with yourself, the time that you wanted to spend with yourself, that is a clear-cut boundary violation. We usually like to imagine kids as just these constant taking and taking devices who would want more attention and want more love and want more affection and just want. But sometimes, as a very healthy response, kids want to be by themselves and they want to distance themselves from other people. Not because they are sad, not because there's an issue, not because they're afraid. That's a whole other category. It's not the kids who are locking themselves in the room, just playing video games all day long and numbing out and literally not being present with their bodies. Whole different ball game. I'm talking about the kids who enjoy some contemplative time, who enjoy being engrossed in the flow state of some form of creative activities, who like to draw or paint or do sculptures or do something with their hands or do something mechanical maker things. It's the kids who value the time that they actively spend with themselves. Because usually similarly as in dream time, in alone time that we spend in a contemplative, especially in a flow state, or some kids just like to read, if they still do that, I don't know. It's usually around those contemplative times when we develop a sense of self. This is when we are not in our reactive mode, but in our assessing mode. This is where our critical thinking kicks in. This is when we self-adjust and readjust. This is when we evaluate how we are relating to what's been happening to us, what we're reading, what we're engaging with. This is when we're able to listen to our thoughts without any interruption. Now, if that space is physically interrupted by another person at random times, when you don't know when that interruption is coming, then the child lives with this constant sense of unsafety, that even though my door is closed, maybe even locked, I'm never alone. I'm never allowed to be by myself, and I'm never allowed to have this space as my extended self. I can be invaded at any point. This gets especially interesting at the teenager years. Just don't interrupt kids at that time of their lives. They are, for obvious reasons, and they're also socially extremely vulnerable. So when there is a social form of rejection or conflict or neglect, they amplify it way more than they should. And their nervous system just gets this imprint that I have to get out of here. I'm not safe at home. I don't want to be here. I had two examples of my space being violated. One was that my mother spent about a half a year, every single year, effectively sleeping in my room. She used my room as her sleeping space because she had a very poisoned, intimate relationship with my father, basically a non-existent relationship with my father, and she wanted to punish him, so she slept in my room for about half of the year. So immediately my space was physically non-existent. And I developed this sense of, I just don't want to be at home. So I've spent a lot of time from like 10, 12 years upwards, roaming the streets in the middle of the night, all by myself, not even hanging out with other kids, just going out down to the streets and just not wanting to go home for as late as I could stay up. And I did that quite frequently, just circling around the block or just going on longer and longer walks because I didn't feel safe going home for many other reasons, but this physical spatial boundary violation was one of the big reasons for that. Another more subtle form of spatial violation would be when someone is snooping around your stuff. Someone is going through your bags, someone is reading your diary, someone is discovering your secrets as their own, someone is using your own property and valuables as their own. Maybe there's a rule in the house that my house, my rules. I paid for it, so it's mine. I have the authority to come in. I come in and go as I please. Those messages, because even physical objects, and it can happen even, especially if it's physical objects, it also, like, I don't have siblings, so it just came across my mind right now that physical objects happen more between siblings, especially if they are forced to share something, because it gives them a sense of, I cannot own anything. Nothing is mine. There isn't an ownership. And that ownership translates as a self-ownership as well. And later on, it can translate as an ownership of emotions. We'll get to the emotional stuff as well. But physical space translates as an extension of the self. And if I cannot own myself, if I cannot expand, I'm going to shut down. And you will see it with smaller and smaller increments where you're locking yourself further and further inside. So if I'm not safe at home, if I'm not safe in my room, if I'm not safe with my belongings, then you have less and less space for yourself that you can claim and own and be powerful in, which later on causes all sorts of relational issues.